Hello and welcome to Hardware Intel webinar series, the webinar from UAP, which is exploring how hardware can help shape our future, from residential properties to commercial. This series will see us discuss a range of fire-related topics with expert insight from within the building industry and thoughtful opinions about how hardware is advancing communities around the world. In today's webinar, we're talking about the specification and use of fire door hardware in the UK. So my name is Nicola John, and I'm a business consultant. And having worked in the door industry for many years, fire doors and quality-related products are really important to me. And joining me today on screen is Paul Goggins, the Specification Director at UAP. So welcome to episode 1, Paul, of the Hardware Intel webinar. Thanks for agreeing to chat with me today about fire specifications. I wonder if you could give the audience a short introduction to your work and history regarding the specification of products.
Sure, yeah. Like yourself, I've been in the building industry for 200 years now. It's a little bit of experience. I started really getting involved in specification when we were at Dale Joinery, a company in Rochdale. We were a door and window manufacturer. When I started there, I found strangely they only dealt with one local authority, and that was Rochdale Borough-wide Council. It was basically in the town, so that was no surprise. So I wondered if there was an opportunity really to expand into that area of the market. And it was good timing because at that point, most of the local authorities had DLOs, direct labour organisations, and they managed their own stores. And basically, they used to go out to the market for doors through builders merchants and timber merchants. As we were a manufacturer, obviously we were a stage advanced in the process. So we could make cheaper and obviously sell cheaper. So I thought there must be an opportunity here. So I started to get in touch with all the other local authorities on a one-by-one basis. Some of them went out, the larger ones went out to tender for their products. So you had an annual tender. So you had to make sure you were in at the point where the tenders were being invited, price it obviously keenly, and then follow up quickly to make sure you got the business. And it was very successful doing that. What it allowed us to do when we got in with the major products that were tendered, they also had a lot of ad hoc requirements. And the DLOs in those days weren't the best organised companies. They used to end up ordering the same stuff over and over again, even though they had it in store. They couldn't find it half the time. So it was quite useful for us when they came for ad hoc products. We were getting our name put forward because we were supplying the major products to them. So that allowed us to get other products specified, including windows in some situations, hardwood doors, all sorts of things. Everything that we supplied, basically, they would have a need for from time to time. So we went from one local authority to when I finished there in 2003, I think we dealt with about 350 housing associations and local authorities. It was the main part of our business, really, certainly for the volume stuff. In 2003, we left with 2 colleagues from Dale Joinery, and we set up PDS, Performance Door Set Solutions. In that situation, I had to get very much more involved because I was the only salesperson. The other 2 were for manufacturing. So obviously, I had a successful track record of local authorities. So I made sure I got in touch with anyone I knew in those as well. But there was a different sort of, the market had changed a little bit. And what was happening then was a lot of the stores were being managed by third parties, companies like Jewson's, Builder Centre, Travis Perkins, for example. They did a very good job in going into local authorities and councils and convincing them they could make their operations a lot more efficient because they were experts in procuring stuff and storing it and logistics and so on. And that worked very well. So it meant you had to be in relationship with the merchant as well as the local authority in that situation. But it also, what happened then, there's a lot of work going on at the time. You'll remember yourself, it was called Decent Homes Programme. So the timing was perfect for us. So the councils were setting themselves up as hands operations, basically elbows, if you like, and they were taking the housing stock from what was the council and then spending a fortune doing them up and getting them to a decent standard. It was opportune. So we were able to get in then and speak to the contractors. We had to identify the contractors that were working on these local authority programs. And of course, a lot of them worked for right throughout up and down the country. So you got in with the likes of Keep Motors, they were known at the time. some of the big boys like Weights and so on. They were experts in that field, so it meant that they were always in the market for the sort of products that we had. So we had to do two things then. Let's get specified by the local authority, and then we had to get specified by the contractor. Yeah. Or in some situations, the council would just specify to a given contractor that they wanted performance door solutions products. So that worked very well. So when 6 years ago now, PDS was sold to Masonite, a big, huge American corporation. I stayed on for 18 months and then I left, and I was mutually excluded, if you like. I was put on eternity leave. So at that stage, I contacted a few people that I knew and let them know. And Dave Jennings, the CEO of UAP, as you know, very kindly, he texted me back to say, "Oh, we've got nothing at the moment, but we've just taken on full X locks. Could you come and have a look at that and do me a bit of a report and so on?" Well, you're doing nothing, basically. So I did that, and then he said, "What do you want to do next?" So I said, "Well, I don't want to go back in full time. I've had like 12 years of like 66-hour weeks and so on. I'd like a bit of a break." So I said, "Can I come back? I'd like to do something for 3 days." He said, "Right, when do you want to start?" So I started the next Monday. That was 4 years ago now. So it's a little bit different in UAP, the specification side, because you're a few stages removed from the decision maker, because we're only supplying a component, whereas at PDS it was a full, complete solution, complete door set. So so there's a job to do in making our products known to the architects and specifiers, architectural ironmongers, door manufacturers, basically anyone in the industry. But they will always be the ones to make the decision to buy it. So you just got to raise the awareness. And then
your experience is really valuable there, therefore.
Yeah, I hope so.
Because
it gets our name in the right place. Sorry, go on.
Absolutely, and because you've specified, all the way down the chain and talk to everybody that's in that chain, you know exactly what people are looking for.
Exactly.
But it's been an ever-changing playing field, hasn't it? And recently, for fire products, over the last couple of years, we've had some significant changes, and I think we've got some significant changes to come. So considering things like the Hackett report, how do you think that those regulations have changed our industry? Obviously, they're going to make fire doors hopefully safer and more consistently compliant. But what's your take on that?
Well, interestingly, the Hackett report it speaks about the central plank of it is a theory called the golden thread, which is basically organisational alignment, for want of a better term. And the idea really is to take the information that's normally just covered by the fire professionals and spread it out to the other stakeholders, interested stakeholders such as architects, fire engineers, contractors, and especially the residents. The idea is to come up with some sort of framework so they can gather information and they can communicate it effectively to anyone that needs to know, any of the stakeholders, as I mentioned. And one of the things in the Hackett report that was recommended was that for high-rise buildings, they appoint what's called a building safety manager. You would have special responsibilities, and sometimes that's just taken on by the facilities manager, and it's just one more thing for them to do. So they want to make somebody more accountable for that, and that he'd be responsible for collating information, making sure it's communicated to the right people. In particular, if there's been a call for action during a fire risk assessment, for example. It's critical that information gets passed to the right people. It might be a maintenance contractor, it might be the compliance people or whoever, so it gets tackled and doesn't get forgotten about. At the moment, there is a lot of information swirling around, but it's in various different places. It's not properly coordinated. So the belief is that would help fire safety immeasurably. To give an example, there's some very easy examples from getting the residents involved in these processes. I've never seen yet when I've been on various sites where contractors, particularly doing refurbs, replacing the flat entrance doors and the corridor doors, for example, you never see the installation company giving any instructions to the tenants. They just fit the door and then go, basically. If you're lucky, might show them how to operate the handle. So they've got a brand new door, and whereas quite often before they've not had a proper fire door on there because it's been regarded as a nominal fire door, if you like. So when they've upgraded, they've obviously gone to a minimum of FD30S, and bring some different experiences for the tenant, particularly the elderly tenants, because now every fire door, as you know, has to have a self-closing device on. Now, depending on how appropriately it's been fitted in relation to the power size of the closer and the size of the door, people could have serious problems getting in and out of that door. And you can imagine the situation in the fire where let's say, for example, that the power size is far too strong for the door in question, and there was a fire, and they tried to open the door, they wouldn't be able to get out properly, not quickly, which is defeating the object, really. So I think it could be explained to the tenants or the residents how important it is, for example, that the door closers working effectively. You know, in building regulations state basically that a self-closing device has got to be able to close the door from any angle into the latch. So you should be able to open that door for as little as 3 or 4 inches, and it should close effectively lock into the latching position. If it doesn't, it's useless.
It is,
What's the point of having seals, intermittent seals and smoke seals and everything else around the door if the door's left open?
Absolutely.
And
I think.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
Yeah, I'm going to say, in fact, one of the things that came out of the report from the inquiry at Grenfell was that how many doors, as a ridiculous amount of the doors didn't have effective self-closing devices. So it actually accelerated the spread of the fire, because people are obviously running out of the flats to get away, and they weren't going to be bothered to go back and latching the door. So the flames were licking through and getting into the common areas, which is disastrous. Particularly smoke. So that's an easy thing for them to do. The installer should be able to speak to the tenant and say, right, this is how you operate the door. These are the critical components that can't be modified. So, for example, the door closer, it could be a very easy fix. That if it's an overhead door closer and it's a power side, they fitted it. Usually the default position is a power size 3, for example. That might be too strong if it's only a 2'6" wide door. So you could show the tenant how to adjust it. You know, if it's too strong for you, but you could wind it back a little bit, as long as it's latching into the door to make it you need it at the optimum power size. Really, the installer should go through that with the tenant and say, right, are you comfortable with that? Is it latching the door, and so on. And the other thing is about the intermittent strips and the smoke seals. You know, how important it is for those to stay in place, because I mean, the tenant didn't know what they were for. Make it a weather strip or a draft strip or whatever. They're not going to, particularly the combined intermittent and smoke seals you get now, they don't even look like a brush seal.
No, they don't. And I think what you're saying is right, because that's what she put in the report, wasn't it, about this golden thread, and more about educating everybody along the chain, and really more collaboration. So not thinking that somebody doesn't need to know something, but sharing that information as much as you can all the way through. And that, I think, will improve the process, which sort of brings me to my second question, because all of this change in legislation makes it really difficult, I think, for social housing landlords and councils or somebody who's got to specify a product. How can they make sure that they're sourcing the right products and things that are suitable, and that, as you say, are fit for purpose in the right type of place and the right person? You know, how do they make sure that they can do that?
Well, first of all, it depends what their supply chain is and how they operate. Are they going to, most local authorities, for example, if they're managing a high-rise block, would have a maintenance contract, or either a term maintenance contract, although they'll have designated contractors that bid for specific areas of work where they're upgrading and so on. So the first thing they've got to ensure is they've got competence in the people who are installing it. So that, or third-party accreditation from the installer. So there's no point buying them sourcing a fully certified fire door and then letting Joe Bloggs fit it and not do it properly. And the same applies for the maintenance, ongoing maintenance afterwards. You know, there's lots. You'll know yourself of lots of issues where people change bits on doors and don't think anything. It doesn't match the fire certification. So
it's not a fire door once you start changing components.
Correct. So again, that's something that going back to the Hackett thing, that's again what the residents should be made aware. If anything gets changed on this, you need to report it, because it's not exactly what was used in the fire test that's supporting documentation, and it compromises it. But if it's the local authority going out to specify what they ought to do, and it's happening more and more now, is they're specifying the easy thing to do is to specify that the door set is produced and supplied by a third-party accredited fire door manufacturer and installed by a third-party accredited installer.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very easy thing to do that. I was very, very surprised that at PDS, we almost from the get-go, we got third-party accreditation because for two reasons. One, it gave me as a director peace of mind that somebody else was overseeing our production and overseeing our processes, and it wasn't just left up to the factory to if you like, self-police, because it wouldn't be them that was going to jail if there was a problem on site and got killed. And the second thing was, it was another layer of insurance for our customers, to assure them that they were getting not just a one-off product that's been done in a fire test, but one that's consistently manufactured to the same standards. That's quite an easy way of them to specify. And like I say, I was very surprised when at PDS, after the Grenfell inquiry, the first sort of things that were coming to hand were they were naming some of the manufacturers that tested doors and so on. And I was really surprised by so few of the big established manufacturers were actually third-party accredited. Yeah,
they weren't. I know, and that really surprised me as well.
Yeah, that's
but now there's been a bit of a take-up, hasn't there, of third-party accredited manufacturers. That bit definitely improved significantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But third-party installers, I think, needs to catch up. What's your view on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they are. What's happened is there's a hell of a lot of anxiety surrounding fire doors now for obvious reasons, particularly from the people who are deemed the responsible person, because no one wants to put their head above the parapet, really. And you can clearly understand why they would. So, if you like, delegating that responsibility elsewhere to say, you want someone that's third party accredited, and they've been audited and they've been challenged and they've been overseen and supervised, it gives you a bit more confidence, doesn't it? And going back to the golden thread thing, that's been expanded from an organisational thing to sort of an industry process now, because not only are you assisting third party accredited installers and manufacturers, but you're also to a point where people are being audited before they even start to manufacture a door. That your notified body wants to know where the components are coming from, and in some situations they'll actually go to the factory, might even be out in China, for example, and examine their processes and examine the quality of the product and so on and so forth. So it goes right from the cradle to the grave. So it's basically starting from components, from tree. Not go and examine the trees, but they wait until they've been, processed to a certain degree, and then it finishes when somebody signs it off at the other end. It's been installed properly, and then there's
that can only be a good thing, can't it, for the whole industry, as a whole, for the residents, for the specifiers, for people who are making the products correctly. It can only be a good thing, I think.
Absolutely, it's consistency. That's the biggest thing, because
it is.
Quite frankly, me and you could go and get a unit tomorrow and start making a fire door, do a primary fire test on it, and take it to market if it passes, provided we've got all the finances and resources to do so. But the point about that is, who's checking that we're making that door next week, the week after, and the week after that to the same standard as the one that was fire tested? Indeed, has it got the same components fitted? Is it the same handle? Is it the same lock? It's particularly the critical products like glass and multi-point locks and so on. And that's what happened in Grenfell. That's one of the things that came out of Dr. Barbara Lane's investigations, that the man's doors that were shown on the fire test report, most of the products that were named in there weren't the ones that were fitted onto the doors.
No.
And it might not have made any difference, but you can't guarantee that. So
you can't. And you and I know, having seen tests done, that's tiny changes to things like intumescence make a big difference. So that leads me perhaps to my next question, really, which is that in episode 2 we're going to look at fire door testing in detail. I'd really like to get your take and your perspective on that new process, so how the doors are aligning with fire safety regulations and the testing process, really, and your thoughts on that.
Well, one of the biggest, there's only been 2 major changes really since for all the attention that's been given. So far, the 2 major changes are non-combustible cladding is allowed. It's not, non-combustible cladding isn't allowed to to be fitted onto or combustible cladding, not allowed to be fitted onto high-rise blocks. That's been stopped. And secondly, in fact, this is not really a change, but there's been a change of emphasis on fire doors now. That it was always considered on a flat entrance door, for example, that if it was tested from the most onerous side, the inside, which is usually that's it, so it's inside the flat, from that direction, that satisfied the regulations. And of course the test houses, that's what they tested to, and they never told any door manufacturers, hold on a minute, you should be testing them from both sides. No. So it's actually enshrined within the guidelines now that an apartment entrance or flat entrance door has got to be tested separately and evidenced information from both sides. So so it performs. So I think the logic to that is, it's unlikely, but sometimes fires will start in the communal areas, and in that situation, you've obviously got to stop. You've got to make sure the routes are clear for people to escape and so on. But it also protects the people. If there was a fire out someone's flat, you want to be sure that fire is not going to get into their flat, so they stay safe for 30 minutes at least until the fire brigade can get there or whatever, and so on. So that's made a major difference really in from a door manufacturer's point of view, in that the testing's a lot more onerous now.
Yes.
They're also nearly always insisting now, it's not yet mandatory, but it's sensible, future-proof wise, to test to EN 1634, which in itself is a more strenuous testing regime, as you know. And it's also a hell of a lot more expensive, because now you're testing, you can have a situation where you might have to test 20 doors both sides. It's an absolute fortune. I know one of the systems manufacturers that spends something like 800 grand testing, so they've got a full scope and range of doors. So that's made a massive difference. So, for example, you can't make assumptions like you used to do, where you basically tested the biggest door, a 914 door, for example, if it was a composite, and you could make anything that was smaller than that. Right down to a 762 fully trimmed, which is coming out about, I don't know, 2'3" or whatever. Totally different. No comparison. And of course, the styles have been trimmed completely back and everything. So that's not allowable anymore. Desktop evidence, if you like, assessments and so forth. People are insisting on primary evidence, but from a manufacturer's point of view, that's a lot of investment. It isn't just the investment in the fire testing itself, which obviously you've got to try and make sure you're successful first time, because if you don't, you're having to do it all again. That's again, it's costing a fortune. So a lot more onus on, like, from our point of view as a hardware manufacturer, critical components such as locks and letter plates, very, very important for the door manufacturer to make sure he's getting them from a reputable manufacturer, and somebody that can provide him standalone fire certification. Because again, a lot of us, you could technically take a letter plate and a lock that hasn't been tested anywhere, put it into a fire test and test it in your door, and if it goes through, you can use it. But people are, why would you take that risk? If you're spending 16 grand on a fire test, why would you take the risk of taking a product from somebody because it's cheap, and they're telling you it'll probably pass? It's too much risk.
Yeah, which is why you at UAP, with things like your TS008 letter plate and things, test them independently first before they go into the, to a customer's door set, if you like. So how has UAP adapted to those new regulations?
Well, for example,
helping your customers with that, really?
Yeah, well, two things really. One, we've got a program of our own primary testing going on at the moment. Again, it's been non-stop really for the last 4 or 5 years. One of those is getting products through certifier, so the certifier approved, which makes it an easier route for door manufacturers to buy our product then, because it's got third-party certification straight away. So they're not relying on even our own primary evidence. They're relying on it's on the certifier process, and that makes it easier for them if they're using a certifier approved door blank, for example, and our product is then accepted and approved as, for example, a letter plate or lock. They're able to then introduce that into their own door set without any further testing, because we've already done the testing on that.
Yeah, that's great.
So that just eases the process for them, and obviously it makes it easier for us to sell our door. But we're spending a lot of fortune ourselves on testing, and we want to give customers confidence that they're not taking a chance when they use our product in a fire test.
No, and I know it's really important to you, to everybody at UAP, that you do that for your customers, and that your customers feel that they're, self-assured that you're testing your products independently, and they're looking at you then for that information, which is really good.
Yeah, what we also do, we're happy to go and we're happy in some situations to contribute towards a fire test, for example, towards the cost, because it is a very expensive process, providing, of course, we're getting some comeback from that, and which we would do. If the product goes on the fire test, then they've pretty much got to use it unless they do another test. So it makes sense for us to get involved in making an investment in that way. And second, we will also, we have experts that will go to site or go to even to the test labs and check everything's fitted to the right standard from our point of view. They're deemed as experts anyway. They're a door manufacturer, but it doesn't mean they've got intricate knowledge of every single component. So I think it's helpful for us to go along, and we've been abroad to test those over there when there was no capacity here, and just to make sure that, for example, on the letter plate and the lock and so on, that everything's fitted in accordance with our instructions and our recommendations. So
and I know you've done that for a long time.
We've done that for.
And when we're looking at the Hackett report, and we're looking at the golden thread, and we're looking at collaboration, that is really the key, isn't it? Because you're collaborating with your clients, helping them, sharing information. That shouldn't be secretive information. It should be shared so that everybody knows what they're looking at. And you touched on composite doors earlier on, which is obviously was my field. But I'm really interested to know, how do you make products like wood, which has been around for thousands of years, used within the sort of fire door safety aspect and fire doors, and how's that going to pan out as we go into the future, really? Yeah,
I mean, there's been a lot of development, as you know, on timber door blanks, the likes of Falcon products and Holspan in particular. They've developed their products over the years to be more and more effective, more efficient, more stable, and so on. And in conjunction with that, ironmongery manufacturers have developed products that will complement a stable door blank. For example, the automatic multi-point lock. So, I mean, in a fire test, as you know, with most fire doors, flat entrances will have a multi-point lock because they also have to be secure by design. So if you fit a multi-point lock during the fire test, the door is only tested latched, and they don't. So in other words, with a traditional multi-point lock, you have to lift the handle up to engage the top and bottom bolts. In a fire test, that doesn't happen. You just hold it on the latch. With an automatic lock, one of the critical things is going back on the fire test, of course, is to make sure, as you get further and further into the 30-minute duration, there's more and more chance of the door misaligning or bending, or so on, distorting gently. So it's critical to keep that door tight, because if it starts to distort, then smoke and fire can get through the gaps. So the beauty of the automatic multi-point lock is, in the fire test, they close that door. They don't do anything different, but as you know, the hooks, the top and bottom hooks are engaged automatically. So that door is being held along the full plane, keeping it tight against the seals, intumescence and the smoke seals. So it's perfect for that example. And again, with other things like the TS008 letter plate, we made certain advances on that. We test that. We actually did a fire test recently, or one of our manufacturers did a fire test recently on our half-hour FD30 TS008 letter plate, and it got 76 minutes.
Wow, that's quite impressive. Yeah,
it's over double in excess of the needed for FD60. So, and
that's the sort of confidence that your customers want.
Absolutely, yeah. You don't want, yourself. I mean, prior to Grenfell, there was a lot more, I'll say, a relaxed attitude in the marketplace, in terms of what you could do and what you couldn't do. So things have tightened up, and it makes it a lot more sensible. But what you used to get, for example, you'd sometimes get a fire test going to 30 minutes and 1 second.
Yeah,
that was deemed acceptable. We've got it through, that's it. There again, if that's the manufacturer that's not third party accredited, doesn't take a lot of slippage anywhere for that to go down below 30 minutes. It's only a second above in a strict, controlled fire test.
Absolutely.
So the fact it's done that, we should shout that from the rooftops. If it's done double what it's needed to do in a fire test, that's going to give a purchaser massive confidence.
Really
is. We're not sailing close to the wind. We're smashing it. With 74 minutes. So the timber doors, really, it's a case of how they're constructed now. They're far better developed. You don't. There used to be a race to the bottom with trying to sell these doors as cheaply as possible, and therefore everyone was trimming them down and trying to get away with as much as they could, use the cheapest materials. There's definitely been a sea change in that now. Manufacturers can't afford that. They can't afford their product to be out in the market and failing fire tests, because that gets out into the domain, the public domain. You don't want to be finding out that, for example, the housebound doors keep failing on fire tests. So they spend a fortune to make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
Timber
I mean,
doors,
our industry has taken a bit of a battering, really, isn't it, in the last couple of years?
Yes.
Maybe quite rightly so. And obviously regulations have tightened up. So I could talk to you all day, because I it's a really interesting subject to me, but we've got to draw it to a little bit of a close. Yeah. What do you think the future of fire doors, fire protection, modern technology, how is the future looking, especially from a UAP perspective and from our clients and industry, really?
Yeah. Well, one good thing that's happened, and it's reflected in the lead times out in the market at the moment. I mean, a couple of the companies that we supply are on 20 weeks delivery lead time, which the marketplace normally is. You expect 6 weeks is the norm, isn't it? 4 to 8 weeks, really, somewhere along those lines, if you want to keep everybody happy. The reason it's gone out to 20 weeks is because things have tightened up so much, and because it's now become so expensive to be able to put fire door sets onto the market. There's less and less people doing it. So there's less and less people that have got the capability to do it, shall I say, and they've got the certification, the documentation behind them. So, of course, there's a big demand out in the marketplace at the moment, because a lot of work that was identified after Grenfell hasn't actually taken place yet. A lot of it to do with COVID. They weren't allowed into property and so on. So there's a big backlog there. That's putting increasing demand on the manufacturers, and it's forcing people to do some more testing and enlarge the product ranges. People getting innovation. And one of the other biggest developments is the move to digitizing the information. I know already 2 or 3 door manufacturers that we supply that are actually provide a door data system, which basically is a plug that fits in the door, just like you get a fire plug, basically a tab. They fit a tab into the door when they manufacture it. Take a photograph of the product. When that arrives on site, the customer can download that information. So people like the maintenance people, for example, the installation company, it would have door manufacturer's instructions on it, pictures of the door. It would describe all of the critical components that are in it, where they've come from, so on. When you get this situation where a letter plate's failed and they just go and buy one from Jewson's and fit it, they can't do that anymore. They have to refer back to the manufacturer's information, get the product detail off them, and make sure they fit the product that was fitted during the fire test. So that's that's almost becoming the norm. You'll be able to go along with a phone, mobile phone, and download the information. It's all held on a central database. That's absolutely critical for the golden thread. You've got a full audit trail right through from the door manufacturer, right through to who installed the door, who maintains it, who the responsible person is, who's the building safety manager. That's got to be a fantastic sort of move forward, really.
Absolutely. And I'm picking up from your earlier point about installers and maybe the tenant or the end user. An app, everybody's using apps these days, an app for the end user on the product and how it works and how it should be working and what maintenance could be done or not, and what to report and what not to on a very simple app with modern technology would be amazing, wouldn't it? Of
course it would. I mean, and if you're in that environment, in a high-rise block now with all the sort of negative pressure and so on, you want to know you're going to be safe, and to do that you want to be informed, don't you? You want to have information about what they were doing in this situation. How important is it if the seal's fallen or the door closer stops working? You can't just leave it. It's got to be dealt with straight away. That's an emergency, really. Not just for you, because you're part of the whole fire prevention the wider process. That could be, something wrong with your flat could endanger somebody in the common area, couldn't it?
It could indeed, yeah. Well, I could talk to you, Paul, all day about fire products and fire things, and but thank you very much. I think it's been really informative, really interesting discussion. Yeah. And I've got to draw it to a bit of a close, but that's all for this particular episode of the Hardware Intel webinar. I'm hoping everybody at home or people who've watched it will have enjoyed it as much as I have. We'll be back next time with our next webinar is going to be talking about fire door and fire product testing more in detail with Julian Roberts, who is the UAP Product Certification Manager. And also joining me will be Richard Morris, the new National Business Development Manager for UAP. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Fantastic. Cheers.